Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. This is Royalty and Romance. Today's class is dedicated to Nishma, to the matron of our synagogue, Mrs. Lily Safra alav shalom, Leah bat Dov HaKohen, Bechana alav shalom, and for the refuah shlema of Moshe Tuig, Moshe ben Shoshana. Shave a refuah shlema. Okay, so we are in middle of our series, and for those of you that are here and those of you that are watching, you may know that my son got married this past Sunday, and thank you. He got married. He did it. Yes, it's official. I was there. He signed the ketubah. He gave the ring. All of the food and the flowers were donated to a wedding that happened last night. So it was apparently the same setup. So everything was given. There was another rabbi who was getting married on Monday night, and they had the same exact setup that we did. And so it was beautiful. There was enough. No, it wasn't at the Safra here. It was at the Westdale Synagogue in New Jersey. But just to share a couple of thoughts and reflections as I'm still processing this, because this was Sunday night. Monday was a slow day. Monday night was Sheva Brachot, and I left late last night to make sure that I was here for you guys, because the class is so important. I want to make sure that the classes are happening throughout the summer. So I take this very seriously. Just want you to know. But you know, it's hard to process a wedding. My initial thoughts were, a little bit of frustration that, you spent your parenting life, please take it. Your parenting life, raising a kid, guiding them, preparing them, educating them, protecting them, making sure that they are able to hopefully be the best version of themselves, right? Making sure they get the right education, the career, choosing the right person. It's so much. And then abruptly, you got to stop and let go, and that's the hardest thing in the world to do. And I've spoken about this before. There's 3 stages in the development of a parent-child relationship. There's first what we call the supervisor, and you're mamash standing there on top of the kid. You're supervising, you're making sure that everything they're doing is right, you're watching them play, you're putting them to sleep, every single aspect, every facility, you are there on top of them. And then at some point you become the director. You're not always on top of them, but you're helping them, kind of like giving them eitzah, go there, do this, and then you're taking a little bit of a step back. And then at some point you have to transition out of being the director into being the consultant stage. The consultant stage is very difficult for parents, because the consultant stage means that you're no longer there to tell them anything, but you're there to be there when they come and ask you for things. So you're no longer offering your opinion, you're no longer in a position to go ahead and tell them what to do, but when they come, but even that's true, but when they come to you, hopefully you have a relationship which is close and strong enough that they feel they can come back to you and ask you for your opinion and for your advice. That's the consultant stage. And that stage, in order for it to be effective, it requires one of the hardest things in the world for a parent to do, which is letting go. It is the hardest thing in the world for us to let go. Very hard to let go. You love your kid, you invested your life, your essence, the deepest part of yourself into something, and now you say, I'm out. That is the hardest thing in the world to do. The tears that a parent has at the chuppah is that you hope that you've given enough to your kid to live a life of independence so they can make their own choices. That's it's a very, very difficult things to process. I'm still processing it. I just got this morning I woke up with such pains. I'm still feeling things in my body that I haven't felt in a long time, from the soreness of the dancing and the singing and the whole night. It was just it was amazing. May we be blessed in sharing in each other's samachot. I was thinking a lot about under the chuppah how, parenting is meant to teach us a little bit of what it is to be godly. God creates a world where He has the power of giving infinitely to every single one of us, but yet what does He do? As a parent, what He does? He lets go. He pulls back. He's like, that's it. Here, you got to do your thing, because ultimately the one thing that we truly want is independence. But at the same time, we're afraid of independence because we don't want people making mistakes. We don't want people making any kind of mistakes. Now, I think this is a beautiful transition into the topic, right? Romance and royalty, Yehudah and Tamar is the subject we started last week We went through a little bit of the Pesukim, the verses that talk a little bit about the scenario that led up to this interaction between these two amazing people. And we spoke a little bit about how the story begins right at the time where Yehuda is demoted from the brothers because of the sale of Yosef. And now we learn a little bit about the history of Yehuda and what he's involved in. Now there are certain parallels that we did not get into last week. Okay? Now we know the way the story goes like this. Yehuda gets married. He ends up having 3 sons, Enon and Shelah. Ends up marrying a girl named Tamar. Ends up dying because the Midrashim tell us that he dies because he does not want to impregnate Tamar because she was so beautiful. He was afraid that if she got pregnant that she would lose her raw beauty. Onan, the next son, has a mitzvah of yibum. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that if a woman is married and she has no children, the next blood relative, with her permission, has the ability of marrying her. He agrees to it, but he does the same thing as the brother before and also dies. Yehuda, seeing that his 2 sons died from this girl, does not want to give the 3rd son, says, why don't you go home, wait, the youngest son is still young, when he gets older, eventually we'll make the shidduch happen again. But he had no intention of doing that. Yehuda ends up going to business. He's in the shepherding business and is going to shear the sheep. And Tamar hears about this and devises a plan to come and confront him. Confront him. Now, what's interesting is that the Pesukim speak about it like this. If you turn to the 4th page, right, which we number on your sheet. There's no numbers on the pages, but there's numbers on the sources. You're looking at source number 12, right? And over there it says, "V'yir'eh Yehuda," and Yehuda sees her, "V'yachshaveh lezona." He sees her, and it says "V'yachshaveh lezona," and he perceived her as being a zonah. Now, how do we understand that? Was she dressed like a zonah? Doesn't say that. It says that he perceived her as being a zonah. Right? Why? Ki kista peneha, because her face was covered. Now, the Midrashim point out something fascinating. There's only one other time in the Chumash, and it happened before this particular story, where a woman covered her face. Anyone know who it was? No? Rivka, excellent. Right, Rivka, when? She got off the donkey or the camel, right? It was the camel, and she sees Yitzchak from afar, and she covers her face. Now, what does this face covering have to do with the story? Why are these women covering their face? Now, the Midrash actually points out and says that because these 2 women exhibited this level of modesty, right, they were zocheh to having twins. Interesting. Rivka has twins, and Tamar has twins. So, but what is this concept of them covering and being rewarded with twins? Yes. Yes, but what does that mean? Right. So good. So there's 2 ways of understanding it. One way of understanding it is that the fact that she covered her face was a practice of zanut, right? Another way of understanding it is that her covering her face itself was an act of modesty, and that it was atypical. We said last week it's weird. Like, why is that? Why is the covering of the face an act of a znut? And one response that we gave to that question was that in Judaism, a woman is meant to have an identity. She's supposed to be able to project herself. She has her own thoughts, her own ideas. She is the keret habayit. She is, we say, b'schut nashim tzidkaniyot, in the merit of the righteous women, that Am Yisrael survived. She has to have presence. She has her own gravitas. And that the idea of her covering her face is a way of objectifying her. That she's just an object. She has no face. She has no identity. She's just a body that's there to use, which is interesting, because the Muslims will dress women in that way, and even though in Judaism we do have this concept of tzniut, of being a tznu'ah, right? But it's not. It doesn't mean that she has no identity. It means something completely different. We said the word tzniut means to express a mysterious part of yourself that invites somebody else to unravel. That's what tzniut really is. Tzniut is the invitation of creating a situation where you're expressing who you are, but not expressing too much so that you are not mistakenly perceived as an object. That's what tzniut really is supposed to be. How that looks like, what that means exactly, will depend on the LOR, the local Orthodox rabbi, or whoever it is that you're consulting, or where you are at in your own spiritual journey. But there's no question that the beauty of what it is that the Chachamim wanted when it came to this concept of tzniut, it wasn't about wearing a potato sack and covering your feminine beauty. It's the opposite. It was about creating a situation where we create a world where the curiosity is still there, where we don't completely lose out in what it means to truly be a woman. So, but I think the most important part here in this pasuk is the way he perceives her. He sees her and misinterprets who she is. Right? It wasn't her goal in projecting herself as being a zonah. That's the important part. Because how do we wrap our minds around the story? You have this woman who's like this righteous woman. She has the greatest of intentions, and she goes out there and she wants to speak to Yehuda, standing by herself in the corner. What is she doing there? We didn't answer that question. What does she want over there? So there's the fact that Rivka wraps herself up, right, and disguises herself, and the Midrash points out this correlation between these two women, tells us something profound about the connection to these two ladies. So what other connections do you have between Rivka and Tamar? Rivka ends up hiding from her husband. What? The helicopter last time also? Right? Rivka ends up having her own ideas about which one of her twin sons should get the beracha from Yitzchak. So she conceals her intentions from Yitzchak. Now, was the purpose of that deception to completely deceive Yitzchak, or to alert him of the mistake that he was making? In the story of Rivka and Yitzchak, Yitzchak makes it clear that he wants to give the blessings to Esav. Esav, go out and get me some food. Get me a shawarma and let's go, I'll give you a beracha. And what ends up happening is Rivka says, no, Yaakov, you bring it first. Was Yitzchak tricked? Was he completely deceived? Is this what we want in Judaism? To create families of deception? Of where we're completely, bamboozling and hoodwinking the people around us? Is that what we really want? Or is there something else happening here? Rivka is trying to alert to Yitzchak, my friend, I love you so much, I can't come to you directly because I don't want to insult you. But what I want to do is I want to alert you to the fact that you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life. And how do we know that's true? The Pesukim say, Vayechared chreida gdola me'od. Right? That Yitzchak had a terrible trembling. He was terrified. Rashi points out, the Midrashim say that when Yitzchak saw that he was about to give the berachot to Esav, it says that Gehenom petucha befanav, that the gates of hell open up in front of Yitzchak. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to see the gates of hell. Okay? And certainly Yitzchak, one of the avot, how does he see the gates of hell? How does he, this righteous man who was ready to sacrifice himself on the altar, get to a place where Gehenom Petucha, where the gates of hell open up before him? It's a terrifying thing. But I think this lesson is so profound. You know what hell is? You know what hell is? Hell is living your whole life knowing that you're about to make a massive mistake and there's nothing you can do to change it. That's what hell is. Hell is Gehenom, is when you're stuck and you thought the world was one way when in reality it's something else. That's what Gehenom is. You know what Gehenom is? Gehenom is living 120 years of your life thinking that the world should run this way, and you find out it's really that way. Gehenom is when you live after 120 and you wake up and your body and soul have been separated, and now you're in a spiritual plane. You're like, oh my Lord, it's all true. The Torah was true, the commands were true, and I didn't live to the best of my ability. That's Gehenom. Gehenom is recognizing a truth that you could have had, should have had, and unfortunately failed to live up to. That was the Gehenom that Yitzchak experienced at that moment in time. a time where he could have seen a greater truth in the younger son's expression of greatness of Yaakov, but instead saw it in the chitzoni external expression of Esav's greatness. That he wasn't willing to peer and penetrate the depth of his own children. Tamar also creates a deception of sorts. Right? How does she do it over here? She comes out there to present herself in a particular way, right? Yehuda misinterprets her. Okay, there's clearly something going on over here. She sees this as an opportunity. Maybe this is divine, that he's asking me for all of this. Maybe there's something more here, because she was acutely aware of the fact that she was supposed to have a child from Yehuda's family. And she sees now that maybe it was a mistake in thinking that it was going to come from the children, but instead it would come from Yehuda himself. She ends up making this proposition. He comes to her and says, I want to hire you for your services as a prostitute, right? And she says, okay, well, how do I know that you're going to pay me? So he takes the cloaks. But before that, look what the pasuk says. I'm a shepherder, and I'm going to send you sheep. I'll give you money. I'll pay you in commodities. I'll give you sheep. This is a very high level of payment, a sheep, because you could use it meat, you could use the skin, you could use all of it. There's a lot of value there. But I don't have it here, so I'll send it to you. I'll give you. She's like, how do I know? Give me collateral. What does she take? She takes a signet ring, takes his staff and his cloak. Right? Now, there's another, I believe, clear parallel between this story and another story of coats and what we call goats. Right? Where else? Yosef and Tzaddik. What's the parallel there? Right? What's the parallel between this story over here and Yosef and Tzaddik? Right? What ends up happening with the brothers? Yosef comes out, he's given a coat. Yehuda takes the coat off and dips it into the blood of a goat. Presents it to his father. And what do? They deceive Yehuda. It's interesting. We believe that what goes around comes around. Yaakov ends up deceiving Yitzchak. Right? Who ends up deceiving Yaakov? His own children. Yehuda is involved in the deception of the death of Yosef. Yosef didn't die. The brothers sold him into slavery. And they made him promise, do not call your dad, right, that you were sold. And this is why he doesn't contact his father. He's out. He was afraid. He was afraid they were going to come after him. We know he was afraid. He was even afraid. He was afraid. We see this even later when the brothers came down to Mitzrayim. He was the whole time he had his personal guard there with them. He was afraid of them. They were a very powerful group of people. We know that Shimon and Levi were responsible for destroying out all of Shechem. These are powerful people. These were very strong guys. These guys would have no problem dancing all night and not being sore the next morning, right? Not like me, right? These guys were a force to reckon with. And what's that? He for whatever he had to go on that path. But it's interesting that we have this concept of deception in the Torah all the time happening over and over again. And it starts with Yitzchak being deceived. It starts with Yaakov being the deceiver, and then it continues with the Shimon and Levi deceive the Shechem also. Another act of deception over there. It's a hard story to digest. Another act of deception over there. Yehuda has another deception story over there, right? Where the goat and the coat serve as a parallel to the goat and the coat that Yaakov was wearing when he deceived his father. You think that's an accident? There's a correlation over there also. And now over here, in this third act, where you see the story of Yehudah and Tamar, another goat and coat relationship over here, not an accident. Now what's interesting is that this whole story with Yehudah and Tamar is in the middle of the story of Yosef, which means that this is really more of a segue story. This is not the main story. The main story is really Yosef. Now, do you think it's an accident that the story of Yosef and Yosef and Potiphar's wife, right, are a parallel story to Yehudah and Tamar? Think of it for a second. What happens with Yosef Potiphar's wife. She comes after him also. She comes after him also. She makes these overtures to him, and Yosef is about to agree. He's about to give in. But he sees a vision of Yaakov, and he says, "Whoa, I can't do this." It's interesting. The Midrashim tell us something fascinating. It says that really Yosef was supposed to be the father of the Shvatim, and he was supposed to have 12 tribes come from him. We know he only has 2 kids, Ephraim and Menashe, right? And it says that he only has 2 kids, and those 2 kids were part of the Shvatim. But had he had 10 more, those kids would have been all the Shvatim. And in that moment, when he was with Potiphar, it says that 10 drops of semen dropped out of his body as a result of this interaction. And those 10 were 10 children that he lost as a result of his almost seduction moment with Potiphar's wife. Right? Powerful moment. But still, it says that he dug himself into skin and he ran away. But now, how do we resolve this? Yehuda ends up being the line that leads to David HaMelech, and Yosef is a king, but he's not a king, right? It's like a weird thing. Like, why is that? Why isn't Yosef greater than Yehuda and his lineage? Why is Yehuda rewarded for having this illicit relationship, and Yosef, who's also sort of rewarded, but not to the same degree, right? Yehuda gives into his passions. He gives into the romance, and Yosef says, "Run away." What would the story look like if Yehuda took the same response as Yosef? What would have happened? Why is this the course of action? What? There would be no David HaMelech, right? So why does David HaMelech have to come from this type of a interaction? Is there a lesson we're meant to learn here? What's wrong with Yosef's approach? Is there anything wrong? First of all, is there anything wrong with Yosef's approach? The answer is no. Yeah, that's the right thing to do. He took a moral act, a moral high ground. There's no question about it. That's why he's called Yosef HaTzadik. He's the righteous one. Yehuda is not called the Tzaddik. Why would the Shvatim have been taken away? No. Correct. He lost because he almost messed up. Yes. He was very close. He should not have allowed himself to get into that position even. The Midrashim say that Yosef was completely naked when he was with you. This wasn't like, "Oh, you're trying to seduce me," and he ran away. This was quiet in the corner in a bedroom, and everything was happening right before they were about to literally go all the way, and then he stopped and ran away in the middle. Okay? That's a completely different story than, the Midrashim have a very colorful graphic. What's that? And he left it and walked away. Like they were in middle of unraveling each other's robes. Right? Potiphar grabbed Yosef's clothing. Okay? Yeah. Oh, that's why you're here. Right.
It's always busy to try to put in my mind that Sadi, the voice in Sadi.
Right.
And yet, that's not what God planned for. There was something very narcissistic about Yosef. Yosef was very much in love with himself, with his image, with his love of the Father, when he sees himself.
Yes.
So God is not the person who will put himself forward, actually.
Correct.
Take the veil on anything.
Right.
But Yehuda does. And it's interesting how it's the first time I'm seeing it, because we never really talk why is this story all of a sudden
right.
Yehuda goes there. Because we do need to come to Yehuda, who is going to be the leader.
Correct.
Because he's the only one from all of them who really takes responsibility to better good.
Correct, it's true. Yes.
For the bad things he does and the good things. And we go with it to the end.
Right.
Yosef doesn't. And of course, Reuven was the Becho.
Right.
So that's actually the first time they are just saying, looking at the story completely in different ways. That's why it's here.
Correct.
Before we keep on knowing what's happening with Joseph, and Joseph is going to be a king of Egypt, blah, 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 and that's it. It's finishing there. Torah wants us to put this little story here.
Right.
Carry it with you. You're going to go with it, and then you come to the end to know why. And that's what I'm saying. It's the first time all the years I've been lecturing, all lecture about this,
Right.
never stop to think, that deeply, why is it here?
Why the story's here? It's like the story itself is in middle of another narrative, right? It's like a weird story. You'll see, like it just like doesn't fully fit in.
There's a tragedy in the other page about Joseph being sold, terrible solution.
Right.
So much more.
And then it ends. Right. This is what we did. We spoke about this last week. I don't want to go back to it. You can find the recording. I'm happy to send it to you if you don't have it. But fascinating. Now, what's interesting is that I suspect, and I said this a little bit last week, I just want to make sure it's super clear in your minds, because this is the theme that I want to take with us when we look at David and Batsheva and Boaz and Ruth. Okay? And this is the theme. Ready? Is that we spoke about this idea of passion and virtue last week, right? And that passion always needs to end up with virtue, okay? And that virtue on its own can lead to a world without passion. But passion can also lead to a world without virtue. And what's so fascinating about this is here you have a man, Yehudah, who's driven by his passions, right? Now, Tamar's intention is super virtuous. We know that, right? It's super clear, right? But what makes the story powerfully profound is that there needs to be a place where these two concepts live in tandem with one another. With Yosef, there's passion, and there's virtue also. But there has to be a place where these two concepts fuse together and become one. Right? This concept of a moral standing and a passionate, this connection to something have to live in a world where they come together. And up until now, they've been very separate. And what makes Yehudah and his life, and the truth, the whole line of everyone in his family, is that they're meant to be something much more than just the tzaddik who's removed from all of the world of passion. He's just living in a world of virtue, just living in a world of spirituality. A world of spirituality without something material cannot exist. Do you understand that? That the nature of the world that we live in itself requires something tangible, something materialistic, for it to absorb it. This is why, by the way, we make kiddush on Friday night on wine. Tangible. We eat, make bread. We're eating the whole time. All of Shabbat is eating. Why? How is that a spiritual experience? And the answer is, you're right. If it just becomes a food fest, where all of Shabbat is just eating, and it's not tied to anything virtuous, you lose it, right? For example, most people don't realize this. What bracha do we make before we eat bread? What's that? Before we eat the bread, before that even, what do? We wash our hands, and what bracha do we make? Al netilat yadayim. So what is the bracha about? We don't say Baruch Asher rachatz yadayim, I washed my hands. What does the word netilah mean? To lift. And the truth is, the halacha is, when you make the bracha, we say al netilat. We're supposed to raise our hands. Al netilat yadayim. That's how we fulfill the mitzvah. Just to raise your hand. That's what you're doing. You're raising the hand. So why are we doing this? It's not about cleanliness, although your hands should be clean and sterilized before you eat, right? Especially today, right? But why do we do? This is the doctors, right? But that's not why we do that, right? But why do we raise our hands when we? What's it called? What's that?
Connecting flesh to spirit.
So part of it, right? So what we want to do is we want to remind ourselves that this thing called the hand often takes things in the material world. And I do it all kinds of physical things with it. And I don't want this moment in time where I'm going to grab food and shove it in my mouth to be like any other grabbing. So I'm meditating for a moment, I'm pausing. And I want to elevate this meal into something more profound. And therefore I'm raising my hands as a reminder that this taking of food should be elevated. I want to take the food and I want to elevate it into something more. I want it to become something bigger. I want it to become something more profound. I don't want it to just be food. I want to elevate the food into something more. So I'm making the bracha of al netilat yadayim, and I remind myself that I want this food to be something spiritual, not just a feeding of the body. So I pause. I make the bracha of hamotzi lechem et haaretz. Right. So now some people on Shabbat, they say Eine kol lecha, right? Yisaber v'ata noten lehem et achlam bito. We say poteach et yadecha u'mazbil chol haratzon, and the custom is to open the hands, right? We open our hands. Do you know that when they did this is a scientific study, that when you stand with your palms out, you are more receptive to ideas? when your palms are facing up, you open yourself up to receiving information. Right? So the idea of literally opening yourself up, poteach et yadecha, is being able to receive something right now. Why do we want to receive? Not the food, we want to receive the shefa. We want to receive the ability of turning this situation of eating into something more and more meaningful. But that has to come from us. We wait often in life for the experiences to change us. But in reality, what's supposed to happen is we're supposed to create a movement within ourselves to allow the experience to change us. If we're not opening ourselves up, if we don't open our hearts to the potential in the moment, we lose out in the meaning in that moment. So we do all these things to try to open ourselves up to that potential. Yehudah and Tamar represent this power of taking these two concepts of spirituality and materialism and fusing them into one in a very extreme kind of way. Now, what's interesting about his story, there is a redemptive aspect to the story itself. Right? We know how the story ends. Yehudah finds out that Tamar is pregnant. And we know she's supposed to be waiting in the background for his son to marry her, to do yibum. So they find out there's rumors going around that, listen, your daughter-in-law, she's pregnant. Something went on over there. She wasn't supposed to do that. So he says, okay, she deserves the halacha of the time, the law of the town was that a girl who's waiting to do yibum and ends up having an illicit affair deserves a death penalty. And it's death by fire. Okay, death by fire. So now they're having a court case. Okay? And Tamar, who was concealed herself, who her father-in-law did not recognize her because she was always concealed and she was always at Snu'ah, is pregnant with her father-in-law's baby. And it's twins. Now, the fire is raging. They bring her out and she's 6-7 months pregnant. Okay. And there's a court session and they want to, before they set her on fire and kill her for her transgressions, they want to give her an opportunity to say a few words. So she's like, Ed, right? So she ends up saying, listen, the father of this child is the owner of this signet ring, staff, and cloak. Now, she doesn't say, it's you! She could have easily said, it's you. You're the head of the Beit Din. She could have pointed out to Yehudah and said, you're the father. What a chutzpah, you're setting up a fire, this is you, it's you. Now, why does she do that? Why doesn't she explicitly call out Yehudah and say, everyone recognize these? Right? Look at this signet ring. It says Yehudah's name on it. Look at this cloak, it's Yehudah's. By the way, the Midrashim say the staff that Yehudah had is the same staff that Moshe used to split the sea. It's the same staff that belonged to Adam Harishon. Same staff that belonged to Abraham and Yitzchak, and it went down to Yehudah from Yaakov, and ends up being passed down from generation to generation. A staff made of ruby.
That's what she gave it?
What's that? Yes.
How come they couldn't go to collect it?
He went to collect it, and she wasn't there. We did that last week. She went to collect it. What's that?
Wasn't he going to send his people
He did.
to perform with her and give her a collateral?
Yeah, he gave her the she said, I'll pay you in cheap, but I don't have it here. He says, okay, give me collateral. She takes the collateral, and he says, I'll send you my guy tomorrow. He comes back and he couldn't find her.
What happened?
He couldn't find her. He couldn't. So
I know that there is like something missing.
no, there's nothing. Okay, let's just go back for a second.
Why would they make it different like this? Who gives a collateral?
He gave a collateral. He was being a gentleman. No, he's not stupid. He gave.
That belonged to Moses.
Yeah, well, Moses was later. He gave it to her to hold because he thought very quickly that he would be able to repay her. Okay. Okay, we're gonna.
Other things in his pocket.
He had nothing with him. He had nothing with him.
Doesn't make sense.
He had nothing with him. Okay. That's how the story goes right now. You're right. We can come back to that. That's not the part of the story I want to focus on. The part of the story that I want to focus on is the fact that she said this was yours. Remember that night? Right? And she doesn't do it. And the question is, why does she not call him out? What's that? She didn't want. Why would he be killed? There's no death for him for that. Why doesn't she want to do it? No, the reason why she doesn't want to do it is because she does not want to embarrass him. Period. And now think about that for a minute. She could have been put into a situation where she would be facing death versus humiliation. Think about that for a minute. She's on a public stage and she could publicly humiliate him. But she'd rather face death than public humiliation. What's that? She does, but now listen, I don't know about you, okay? But if I was in that situation, I don't know how I'd respond. I don't know. I don't want to be tested like that, God forbid. But that's a very difficult. You're right, and you're right. We know how the story ends, and thank God, at the end of the day, he ends up saying it's mine. He takes responsibility for it. He ends up taking responsibility for it for himself. It's true. You're right, but you're going too far. Take a step back for a minute. Pause. You watch the movie. You're watching it again with me. Okay, pause for a second. Okay, that scenario is there. She presents it, and she says, "Now you choose your move." How could have that played itself out? How could that story evolved? Think about it for a minute. Here's a character who's very, very, very fishy. He lies to his father, okay, deceives his own father, okay, the brothers demote him, he loses faith, he's in a precarious place. He tells Tamar, go home, I'll give you my other brother, but we know his intention was to never allow him to get married. So he's in a very interesting place. He doesn't have very high moral standing over here. And the truth is, if we just stopped over there, I would argue that Yehudah was more likely to say, well, I don't know what that is. Kill her. Get rid of the evidence. Give me those staff. Give me that ring.
Well, he basically said that when he said, never mind, we keep it quiet, that we can't find her, we don't know who she is, just let it go.
It's true.
He does say that. Let it go, so we won't be embarrassed. He does say that.
Look at the last page, number 17. Right? She presented the staff.
Let it, number 23.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
It's so interesting to hear how the women are responding.
Yes.
They never talk about the position of Tamar's mindset. They talk about the fascinating how
It's different, 100%.
the male and female response.
Yes.
Her position.
I don't know, my take is more
Yeah.
from Tamar, because
Yeah.
I believe she set him up. I think she said, I'm not sitting around waiting anymore. I'm
Yeah.
going to war him.
Right?
And she set the whole thing up.
Yeah, she totally did. The same way, I agree with you. I would argue the same way that Rivka set up Yaakov to awaken Yitzchak, Tamar is doing the same thing here with Yehudah, awaken himself 100%. There's no question about it. That's clear to me. I think that's simple, pashup pshat. That's what's going on over here. That she's doing this with the intention of, hey, you told me that this guy, your son, was going to be my husband. You lied. Here we go. This is proof of it. Yeah.
I'm not saying she set him up in a bad way. She set
Yeah.
him up in a good way.
To reveal.
She
To
gets
yeah.
what she needs.
100%.
She gets what he
Yes.
So
Yes.
it came from this.
Yes.
If we didn't have this follow-up that David came from this,
Yeah.
how eloquent really good.
So
We all feel really good about it because David came from.
the question you're asking a good question. Let's sharpen it for a second. Why do we even need a story? Meaning, yeah, why do we need a story? Just the David story, the story of David. Yeah, but who cares? Forget. Yes, I know it's there.
One sentence in the whole story that is well the whole story. The scene when we see a man change under the trees, when he says a sentence, Satkami Meni.
Right.
He knows he's going to be loved for me. He knows
Good.
he will say behind his back. But this man stands once in his life
Right.
and takes responsibility of his life.
Right.
And for this sentence, I think it was well, the whole story always worth it for me. And for this story, I wanted him to be the little.
Okay, good, but that's true. Yes, I agree with that. This verse on the last page, you look at it quickly with me. Number 17 in the sources, 38:26. V'yekar Yehudah, and Yehudah recognized her. Tzadka mimenu. She is more righteous than I. Right? That's a powerful statement coming from a man to a woman, that she is more righteous than I. Ki al ken lo nitneh l'Shelah b'ni v'lo yasaf od l'da'ata. Right? I did not give her to my son Shelah. She was right. But listen how the pasuk ends. V'lo yasaf od l'da'ata. And he was not intimate with her again. Didn't touch her again. It's interesting that the story of the two women in the Torah, of the women who covered themselves up, their story ends abruptly. Rivka, after that, you hear nothing. The only time we hear about Rivka again is when Devorah dies, right? Her maidservant, right? Her mioneket, right? And then over here, that's it. Tamar, gone. After the story, we don't hear a little bit. We hear about the babies, and that's it. She's gone, done. The narrative's over. Ki'ilu, as whatever we're meant to learn from it is here. Figure it out. And walk away with the pearls of wisdom that are buried in the Pesukim itself. Right? But it's interesting that these two ladies, these powerful figures, were proactive in allowing us to uncover the truth in the most beautiful, beautiful way. When we see injustice, our natural inclination is to say, you lied, you did this wrong, and I'm going to tell you about it. But these women figured out a very clever way. And I suspect that this is what femininity is, and I should not be speaking of femininity because I am not a woman, but I suspect, because I think honestly I'm going to say this, and I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for it, but I really believe we lost femininity, and that's a bad thing. We lost the concept of femininity, of what a female power is, and we've kind of allowed ourselves to give into a masculine interpretation of reality. You know, it's a mistake. On every level, because we believe that there's supposed to be balance between these two forces, but we've lost it a little bit. And I think these two women who are expressing this concept of understanding truth, but being so careful about how they're expressing it, it's not a weakness in women, and it's a beauty that it's an art. There's an art and a beauty that is there that we don't appreciate. I'd much rather be in the masculine world of you're wrong, you're going to jail, goodbye. That's the world of masculinity, right? We say that masculinity is tied to the concept of emet. Not that women chas v'shalom are not true, but masculinity itself is, this is here, it's now, it's tangible, I could see it, it's visual, I know exactly what it is. But the world of femininity does not operate that way. The world of femininity operates in the world of shmi'ah, of hearing. The word Shema, Vayishama Shaul et ha'am. What does that mean? Does it mean that he heard, that Shaul heard the people? Vayishama Shaul et ha'am actually over there means that he gathered the people. That Shmi'ah is the art of gathering, the art of pulling people together. There's a chokhmah. I'm actually in the middle of reading a book called The Art of Gathering, but which is fascinating. It's about how we create spaces where people get together and share. Right, and that's a feminine power. This concept of inclusivity, of bringing people together, opening up a space, of making people feel comfortable, of giving people the opportunity to respond before you're pointing, and just there's a genius here that was lost a little bit. And these two women who are these geniuses of expressing femininity, right? We don't see them anymore because they don't want to be seen. Yeah.
You call that genius, but can we associate these women at that time knowing that the death was really what they were going to experience? Call them more like oppressed, fearful, ashamed of themselves, feeling guilty?
No.
And associate all that to their response as opposed to just being a genius?
No, I don't. And I know that that's a narrative that people want to present, but I don't hear it, because if you compare and contrast the stories of the women in Torah versus other ancient civilizations, there's no comparison. Like, you're right, maybe that's true in Greece, and maybe it was true at different times in Rome and different times in different parts of history around the world, but it wasn't true here. Jews were super liberal when it came to certain parts of our society, and women definitely played a major role. You have Devorah, you had Miriam, you had these women who were taking massive leadership roles. It was unheard of that a woman should be a prophet, and we speak about her. Christians have Mary, one woman, and she had no nevuah. There's a claim that she had this interaction with God and she had this immaculate conception, But you don't see that anywhere else. Is there an Islamic prophet that you know of that existed? Not that I know of. I don't know. Maybe someone could educate me. I don't know. I haven't heard of it, but Judaism, we have the Sheva Neviot. We have women who are very much part and parcel of the narrative of our story. We see it all the time. Esther HaMalkah played this massive role in saving the Jewish people. We see it over and over again, that it's the act of femininity that allows the Jewish people to express truth. Now, what's interesting is like this. I'm going to say this. I don't want to say things that are, but if you ever look at Hasidim, right? And this is not me ranking at any different sect of Judaism. Everyone has a claim to a truth. But if you look at the way the men dress, I would argue, to me, it looks a little feminine. With those socks pulled up like that, and if you notice their buttons, actually, they button their jackets the opposite way. And males go from, we have our button, men have their button on the right side, and for Hasidim have it the opposite way. There's actually a place in Borough Park where you could buy white shirts where the buttons button the opposite way. It's like a whole other and there's a little bit of femininity in them. You ever see how I grew up in right near Borough Park. I grew up in Sunset Park, so I grew up with a lot of Hasidim around me. Most of the people I grew up were Italian, and I grew up in a neighborhood which was a very racist neighborhood, very anti-Semitic racist neighborhood. And I watched a lot of people I used to get into a lot of fights. I was the Jew who was with the non-Jews, who was working on the inside to protect the Jews, right? So I would often see them, Hasidim kids being picked on and this and that, and they don't know how to fight. They don't know how to. It's like a weird thing. Be a man. What I'm saying? A man's got to get a spear and go out there and just fight. That was the world I came from. I don't know if it's my background, whatever it is, but I wrestled people to the ground. We got into fights. I got punched in the face. That's just the way. That was the world. That was the world that I came from. And you go at it, you conquer, you take, and you fight. But these group of people, they didn't know how to fight. You see these videos of Hasidim. They're getting their. I would run after the guy. I wouldn't stop until I kill the guy. I would find the guy. I get my hat back. But there's a beautiful femininity to that. And to them, right? And it's not masculine looking at all. Now, and I could see how the Goyim can see this and say, oh, they're weak, and we're going to take advantage of them, like women, right? You're like a girl. Stop being a sissy, stop being a girl. It's a mistake, right?
I'm always wondering why they are like this, why they are more.
There is a feminine trait to we let go a little bit, and we're not. It's a little bit of surrendering. I'm not going to be that. I don't want to be the guy out there with the sword and the shield and fighting and so on and so forth. It's a different approach. I'm not saying it's just different. But what I want to say, there's beauty in it that I have a hard time with because I'm in such a masculine mindset of what a gever is. Right? When I see that, I have a hard time with it because it looks feminine to me. But why can't I see the beauty in it as well?
Because they're going on Concord Dabat Melech Pima, so we are sitting in yeshiva all day.
You're right. It's true. Listen, again, I'm not trying to criticize. This is more of a critique on me, not on them. I'm not here to criticize anybody. Everyone's allowed to do their own thing. They have their own way of expressing themselves. I believe in that. There's 12 Shvatim, and there's 12 different paths for different people to express themselves. I have no problem with that. There is no one true truth. There are multiple truths, and there's different ways of expressing that truth, and we need to figure out what works best for us. That's the emet. The emet is there's different ways of expressing truth, and our job is to figure out how we take that truth with us and grow on our own. But there's no question that there was this power in femininity, and that power of bringing people together, I believe it's lost. We don't appreciate it, we don't like it, we don't respect it. But these parshiyot over here, the story of Yehudah Tamar, is the concept of malchut. What is a melech? What is a king? And if you think about this, and maybe we'll touch on this a little bit next week because I know it's hot and it's long, I believe that malchut is an expression of femininity. Yes, that malchut, kingship, the power of the monarchy, is meant to be feminine, not masculine.
I think you're right.
How do I know that? In a Jewish kingdom, a king has no role. He can't make new rules. He's only there to enforce what's already there. He's there to express and maintain and develop and help people get together, protect. Right? There's a level of gvura, of boundaries that are associated with being a melech that's similar to femininity. There's a lot of parallelism. You're right, they did, but remember that Jewish wars are never meant to be proactive wars. They're only meant to be defensive wars. That's why we call it the IDF, the Israel Defense Force. We're not meant to go out and just conquer. I'm pretty sure we're the only ancient people in history that never went to expand their borders and boundaries beyond what they had. We had the military might to go out and conquer more. We could have gone to higher up north and south. We didn't do it. We don't want that. That's not our role. We're there to protect Eretz Yisrael. We're there to help evolve humanity and allow them to see outside of the idols and their false gods. That's what we were there for. We're here to challenge humanity. And we've done a great job at it. We've challenged humanity with moral responsibility. We've challenged humanity about what it means to be just. How do we protect the weak? We've done that. We're still doing it. That's our role. But be mindful that it's coming from this feminine place. And Bezrat Hashem, next week, we're gonna. What I want to do is we're gonna go into a little bit of Boaz and Ruth, and we'll kind of like see the parallelism over there, of virtue, passion, how it unfolds in their story, and we'll try to explore this concept of malchut together and see what does it mean for it to be more feminine than masculine. Why is the story still important? We haven't fully answered the question, but hopefully in time you'll help me unravel the truth. Have an amazing week. Thank you so much for listening.